It is 8:09. My next guest is in the studio. She is a broadcasting legend. I don't like to use the word royalty, but certainly a legend here in Ottawa. You probably know her from the show Regional Contact on CTV. She got her start here at CKCU, spent some time at Shea, and now, or has been, she's an author, she's a public speaker, she's a workshop facilitator, and she's a coach. Kathie's mission is to connect people with true happiness, and she'll help you push fear aside and step into the courage it takes to bring your dreams to life. She joins me here in the studio right now. Good morning, Kathie.
Good morning, Tick.
How are you?
I'm so good. I was listening to you on the drive here.
Oh, you did, eh? So
you're hilarious.
I mentioned your name. I said, if she's listening, maybe she'll offer some tips when you get here. Now, as I mentioned, we were talking off air. You're originally from Montreal, and points beyond that. Mm-hmm. But you came here to Ottawa in 75 and started working right here at CKCU.
Yes, I did.
Do you remember those days?
Oh, my goodness, do I remember them through a foggy haze.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
That were those days, that foggy haze. I'm sitting in the chair that do you know John Kapelos? He's now an actor. He's worked in a lot of John Hughes' movies. Right. John Kapelos sat in this chair, and we did a show called He and She together a few
the He
times.
and She Hour.
Yeah, we did that a few
took
times
on,
together.
Different people took over that show.
Exactly. Different people. We did it for a little while together, and we were good friends. And Rob Braid, one of my all-time heroes, he was the guy who I came into CKCU one day. I was working at the Roots shoe store when I first came to Ottawa, and I heard about CKCU signing on. And of course, I was a big fan of Chaume FM in Montreal. That's where the magic really got fired up for me.
For me too.
And right?
Oh yeah.
And so I came into the station to meet with Rob Braid. Didn't know anything about the guy. Turns out he's from Montreal, and he idolized the same people I did on Chaume. So we hit it off, and he stuck me in the studio, the closed circuit studio, and said, just give it a whirl, see what happens. I had no idea what I was doing. And the next thing I knew, he was at the window of the door looking in. He came in and he said, "What did you just do? What is that music?" And I'd literally gone to the stack and pulled a record. It was Chicago. And I played this track I'd never heard before, but the way I mixed it, just how it happened, was absolutely beautiful. But of course, totally beyond my capability. And he said, "Would you like a shift?" And I said, "I would love that." So
were we allowed to play Chicago in 1975?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Well, this was the beauty of radio at that time. If you remember, we could play whatever we wanted.
For sure.
And even in commercial radio, when I went to Shea, we played whatever we wanted within a certain universe of music. It was so wonderful.
Mm-hmm. How long were you here at CKCU?
It was about a year and a half.
So not too long.
Not too long.
Well,
long
because
enough.
you got a paying gig at
Yes.
Shea.
Well, my dream was to, I discovered the magic of radio when I was 8. I was part of a children's radio show in St. John, New Brunswick. And it was there that I discovered this idea of magic. You're in this room with no windows, and people on the other side of town can hear what you're doing. That was just mind-blowing to me. So that seed was planted a long time ago for me, and ideally all I wanted to do was to connect people, because when I went to boarding school in Montreal, so I'd sleep away from my parents' home 5 days a week. And at night, I'd listen to CFCF. There was a disc jockey there at night, and he'd say at a certain time every night, he'd say, "Good night." And so I had a transistor radio under my pillow, and that really connected me to something again. So it's this concept of community that just always stayed with me, and I felt I wanted to return what had been given to me. This concept of you're not alone. It feels like you're alone, but when you're part of a community, you feel connected to something bigger than you. Mm-hmm. So that's always been my mission, and so when Shea came along, I was in line. Took me a year or so to finally land a full-time job with them, but I just worked my way, and I loved it. Never worked a day.
It must have been great. I know you've had the opportunity to go on stage at a giant rock concert to introduce the band. That must be the coolest thing ever as far as a radio announcer. It's probably one of the
most nerve-wracking things a person who,
Really?
especially somebody who worked in radio. When you're in radio, it's not about how you look, it's your voice and
Right.
it's people's imagination. But all of a sudden you're a person and you've got to go and do this in front of all these people. It was really weird. Television really sort of helped me get super comfortable with judgment, but in radio it was just so much magic, so much part of that.
And that's the coolest thing about radio is that when we listen to our personalities, we create this image of that person.
Yeah.
And so when we have open house here at CKCU and people come in, they'll recognize my voice from afar.
Don't you love that?
Well, I do. But the first question I ask them is, did I meet or exceed your expectations?
Well, why would you ask that question?
Well, because sometimes the image that you create does not match the reality.
Well, never.
No, but sometimes you're disappointed and sometimes you're overly pleased.
I don't want to know the answer.
I know
frankly.
you don't.
Well, and it's funny because, I'm vertically challenged. I'm a shorty.
Well,
and what's funny is people always still to this day say, I didn't expect you to be that short. And I say, this is my line. You have to be small to fit in the box. Mm-hmm. Because what else can I say? I was born this way. I love being short. It's not a problem for me. But because people have such vivid imaginations, they don't think guys like Lloyd Robertson could be less than 6 feet tall, but he's a shorty too, as was my co-host Joel. So to me, the freedom listeners have when they're plugged into a radio community is just, I love it. There's nothing like it.
Well, and you hold nothing back. Like I was going to bring up the shortness issue because, again, we create this image, and I'm pretty sure I remember you introducing a band at the Civic Center.
Yeah.
I'll call you a hottie at the time, if we're being blunt here.
Thank you.
But again, like Rick Mercer, TV makes these people look smaller. Photographs, even your photograph on this book, there's no
perspective.
There's no perspective.
Yeah, but you know what? There are mini sunflowers on the cover of my book. Seriously, there was a plot that one summer at the experimental farm of mini sunflowers.
That's hilarious.
Michelle Valberg took that picture, and but what it is, Tick, is it's our imagination. Mm-hmm. It's how we want to perceive people, because people we see on television, see in the media, we think of them as larger than life.
Right.
You know what? We're friggin' people.
Exactly.
Period.
I know.
And some of us are nice, and some of us are not.
Exactly.
Period.
Like me. I'm not.
Oh, I'm not
a nice guy.
You're hilarious. You're just a curmudge.
Well,
you're one of my favorite curmudges.
Yes and no. I mean, I think what I say people can relate to.
Yes,
if you were listening, I mean, did I say anything that was
Not
contrary
really.
to people's popular opinion? No. I mean, there's just certain things.
I'd rather listen to you than Donald Trump any day.
Yeah, like talk about insanity. Why do we even give this guy an ounce of our thought? It's like, and
wait till you read my book.
He's bad enough. It's like there's this issue I always have. It's like, okay, he's bad, but what concerns me the most is the 100,000 supporters of him.
100,000?
No, millions.
Millions, yeah.
And that's what's truly in my heart
and
terrifying.
we're not here to rant about that, but I just want to make a sidebar comment about what you said earlier when you were ranting. The fact of the matter is, these politicians, these types of thinkers, bring out from the woodwork people who think these thoughts but don't articulate them. Mm-hmm. But when they see a leader, so-called quote-unquote leader, saying these things, it's like, right on, he's got my back, now. And I know people who are Democrats, whose siblings are Democrats in the U.S., who believe in this guy. I'm like, dude, come on. You got to get some critical thinking going on here.
Yeah,
you got to get human. We've got to wake up.
Yes.
But anyway, that's a whole other conversation.
And there's so much to talk about. You're really here. What got my attention was I got an email about an inspiration event held at, I think it was Ernest Young Center.
Ben Franklin Place.
And I'm always interested in these things. I guess the slogan was, let us take care of you and your dreams for a day. Mm-hmm. It's a motivational speaking day. Several speakers, reasonably priced. How much harm can it do to kind of get maybe a few tips or a different way of looking at things? You wrote a book called Inspiration and Action, A Woman's Guide to Happiness. First question is...
Why a woman's guide?
No. Can a guy read this? Is it inappropriate?
It's called a woman's guide because it's been my guide to happiness.
Okay.
So the idea is there are 8 principles in the book, Tick, that I researched over 21 months with a group, and I call it kind of a foundation group. What happened to me was... Well, I'll just give you a little bit of backstory about my life, because I think there has to be context here. I grew up in a very, we put the fun in dysfunctional, you could say, my family.
Is this like Shameless? Did you ever see that show?
Yeah.
Not that bad?
Well, everybody has their own experience, I guess. My dad was with CPR and public relations, and back in the 50s and the 40s, that meant PARTY. So there was a lot of alcohol, and my dad was an alcoholic, no other way to say it. My mom lost 2 babies before my sister was born, and I think at that time, back in the early 40s, they didn't diagnose depression the way they do today or support it. So my poor mom did her best, but she was a very negative, very critical person, very fearful person. So I grew up with this as my role model, and that's what I came to know about life. I was afraid of everything. I was terrified, and I was full of shame because my father was an alcoholic, and I had this negative, mean mom. So where's the joy, and why would I bring anybody into my life? So I wet my pants from the time I was born, I guess, until I was in my early teens.
Just stop there for a sec. What do you mean by fear?
Fear of everything. Fear
in what
of
way?
everything.
Fear of going
being
to a
seen,
party?
Fear of talking to people. When I went to grade 1, I was terrified of everything.
Was this shyness or fear?
Yeah, well, it was
both?
fear. It was both. I didn't want to be seen. I didn't want anybody to know me. I didn't want to know anything about the world. I wanted to hide. That's what I want. That's what my life felt like. But, then when I was 8, these seeds were planted when my dad was invited to have me go to this children's radio show because I had zero self-esteem. I didn't have that feeling of unconditional love that you're supposed to have when you feel good about your life, right? When you feel that you got a good, solid foundation. Plus, my family moved from one coast to the other because my dad was transferred. So the ground seemed to always shift underneath me. And, as I became a teenager, I developed all those wonderful unhealthy habits like smoking and drinking and, sex with boys I didn't really know very well. But it was a way for me to connect with another person. There seemed to be an open door there, but it was always slammed shut not too long afterwards. So I liken it in my book to putting my hand in an overstuffed purse and pulling out all kinds of things I thought would make me feel good, and none of them worked. I tried everything.
And you're very open with that in the book. I mean, the first half of it,
I just think there's enough of people not being open about the truth. I mean, there's nothing scary about what happened in my life now that I look back on it because I actually got support and help when I asked for it. I think today we cover up so much. We pretend everything is nice. If you look at social media, everybody's doing great. Everybody's got the life of Riley. Well, we all know that life happens to all of us. My thing is, what are you going to do with what happens to you? So that was to set you up for, that was my life. It was not happy at all. I was the opposite of happy. I was miserable. And I was very much about, wanting to be right because the conditions around me needed to meet my needs, right? So, but then I realized this was not where I wanted to be. I wanted to have that idea of helping other people to connect with that feeling they're not alone. So I needed to improve my own conditions in order to be able to do that properly. Because if I was miserable, what was I actually offering people? Was not a healthy connection. So at one point, one of my friends just said to me, look, you know what? I think you should meet my therapist. And I'm like, I don't think so. I think that's whacked. But I went, and I met this most wonderful guy named Dr. Weiser. And he was a super wise guy, and he really helped me to investigate my own life and what had happened in my past. And to, I was about 35 years old, to really, truly accept responsibility for my own life now. To understand that after 3 years of therapy, that my parents did the best job they could. And that now it was up to me. What did I want to choose and how did I want to live my life? And from there, I started to plant different seeds. I call myself a farmer because I think I'm always planting seeds and nurturing them to grow new things in my life. So I started to shift how I began to see my life and my relationships. And he taught me in relationships that are healthy, you give a penny, you get a penny back. You give a nickel, you get a nickel back. You give a dime, you get a dime back. But you don't just go give the whole shooting match out of the gate. You have to earn, and people have to earn trust. So then I read the book The Secret, which was all about the law of attraction. Have you heard of that book?
No, but I went through quickly. I speed read your book, sort of, and that's what caught my attention. This law of attraction.
Yeah.
You and a group of people kind of got together to do this,
to discuss
and
it.
as soon as I see the law of attraction, I'm thinking physical spouse-mate attraction. But you're talking about something bigger than that.
Yeah, it's actually described as a secondary universal law. So an example of a primary universal law is gravity. So it's actually quantum physics. It's not romance, although, that's part of it too, because that's all energy. It is all about energy. everything is energy. If you understand physics at all, the table, the studio, the microphone, you, me, our hair, everything is energy. It's all vibrating at a certain resonance. And our thoughts and feelings are energy too. And that's the thing we don't talk about or we don't think about, because there's a wonderful neuroscientist by the name of Dr. Jill Bolte Taylor in the United States. She was researching why her brain was so different from her brothers who had schizophrenia. She wanted to understand the human mind better. And in her research at a university, prestigious campus in the States, one morning she got up to go to work and she had a stroke.